You ever have a moment where your whole world shifts in a sentence? Mine came at 9:04 a.m. on a Wednesday. Marcus Langford, the vice president of Nextger Dynamics, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your services are no longer required. Ethan, we believe your recent behavior shows a lack of loyalty." Loyalty? For me, I'm Ethan Walker, 31, technical sales manager. Or at least I was. For nearly a decade, I bled for Nextger Dynamics, closed seven-figure deals, built systems from the ground up, missed birthdays, holidays, relationships, all sacrificed for the damn promise of maybe next quarter. And now, fired. Just like that. For what? Taking one day off to interview with another company, on my own time. No warning. No meeting. Just a walk into a conference room where HR was already waiting. Lips tight like they'd practiced the betrayal. I didn't throw a fit. Didn't beg. Just stood there while Marcus leaned back in his $1,000 chair like he was doing me a favor. Said something about protecting the company's interests. I think I laughed. Not loud. Just one of those broken laughs that leaks out when the mask cracks. Because Marcus didn't fire me because of an interview. He fired me because he knew I was finally realizing my worth. And he couldn't control that. I packed my things. Walked past the same people who used to cheer my name at the quarterly sales rally. Now they just avoided eye contact. Like betrayal was contagious. My name badge felt like a betrayal in my hand. But as I walked out those glass doors, I wasn't broken. I was boiling, quiet, focused. Because Marcus just started something he has no idea how to finish. And me? I always finish what I start. Wait until he sees what loyalty really looks like. When it's turned into revenge. I barely made it to my car before the shock wore off and something darker took its place. Rage? No, this was cleaner than rage. It was clarity. I'd wasted the prime years of my life building someone else's empire. And when I dared to consider a life outside that glass cage, they tossed me like a used napkin. But they didn't just fire me. They accused me of being disloyal. Like I hadn't pulled double shifts, flown cross-country at a moment's notice, and closed the largest deal in Nextger history last quarter. $7.8 million. They said I lacked loyalty. I opened my phone, stared at the unopened text from Virion Technologies, the company I'd interviewed with the day before. Their director of business development had offered me a job over lunch. I hadn't replied yet. I hadn't made a decision. But now the decision was made for me. I called him right there in the parking garage, voice flat. "If the offer's still on the table, I'll take it." "Ethan, that's fantastic news," he said. "We were hoping you'd say yes. We've already got your onboarding scheduled. Monday work for you?" "Monday's perfect." I didn't go home. I drove to my brother's place in Arlington, sat on his porch with a beer in one hand and a plan forming in the back of my mind. Because Nextger made a mistake. They didn't just let me go, they turned me into a problem with a memory. And I remember everything. The fake budget rollovers. The bonuses that never arrived. The contracts misplaced just before commission deadlines. I didn't know the full picture yet. But I'd seen cracks. Things I'd pushed aside because I was too busy, too loyal, too damn tired to look closer. Not anymore. And then the first text came in. From Julia in accounting. It simply said, "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Call me." I stared at the message, heart starting to pound. Julia wasn't just anyone. She was deep in the numbers, in the guts of the company's finances. Quiet, sharp, honest. If she was reaching out, something was very wrong. I called her, and what she said changed everything. Julia answered on the first ring, voice low, nervous. "Ethan, you didn't deserve what happened. None of this makes sense unless you know what's really going on." I sat back in my car, engine idling, heart racing. "Talk to me." She hesitated, then said it. "There's money missing. A lot of it. Bonuses that were approved but never paid. Vendor payments that don't make sense. And Marcus has been signing off on everything." I didn't breathe for a second. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I saw your name on the list last week. The list of people they were planning to cut. There were 5 names. All of you had raised questions, asked for missing commissions, pushed back on reports. Then you took that one day off, and it gave them a reason. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Julia continued, Darren Schultz, your old manager, he warned me last quarter, said something felt off. Then he quit out of nowhere. You remember that? I did. Darren was old school. Straight shooter. Never said goodbye, just gone one Monday. I asked, you think they're cooking the books? She exhaled. I know they are. And if you're smart, you'll walk away. Start fresh at Virion. Don't look back. But I wasn't built like that. You don't gut yourself for a company for 7 years, get tossed like trash, and just move on. You remember. You investigate. You act. Julia, I said slowly, I'm going to need everything you have. Every payment trail, every discrepancy. Ethan, I could lose my job. I already lost mine. And you might be next. She was quiet. Then, meet me tomorrow. After work. The old parking garage on Elm, level 4. I'll bring what I can. I ended the call and sat there, adrenaline buzzing. This wasn't just office politics or a vendetta. This was a cover-up. A system of rot. I didn't just want revenge now. I wanted justice. And I wasn't going to stop until Marcus Langford and his whole dirty operation burned down around him. Level 4 of the Elm Street garage smelled like rain-soaked concrete and forgotten secrets. Julia was already there, parked in the shadows, hands trembling as she handed me a worn manila folder through her passenger window. I only printed what I could without raising alarms, she said. You need to be careful. Marcus has people watching. Ever since that SEC scare last year, he's been paranoid. I opened the folder right there. Vendor contracts, duplicate payment reports, payroll summaries, and a spreadsheet labeled Deferred Bonus Payouts Q1, Q4. Over $450,000 marked as approved but never issued. All redirected under vague line items. Adjustment allocations. Discretionary withholdings. And I recognized names. Brian McLean. Cindy Harper. Aaron Fields. All good people. All loyal. All screwed over like me. I looked up. How long has this been going on? Years, Julia whispered. But it got worse after Marcus was promoted. He started bypassing standard payment protocols. Everything funnels through one approval chain now his. And HR just goes along with it? They don't see the back-end numbers. Only what's in the system reports Marcus's assistant generates, which he controls. She nodded. Then she said something that made my stomach flip. Darren tried to expose it. Right before he left, he called a friend at the Attorney General's office. Said he had evidence. 2 days later, he turned in his badge. Never even picked up his last check. That wasn't quitting. That was running. I stared at the folder again, heart hammering. Do you have his number? She hesitated, then scrawled it on a sticky note. I didn't go home. I drove straight to a diner off 183 and called the number from a burner app. Hello? The voice was older, weary. Darren. It's Ethan Walker. A long pause. You weren't supposed to be next, he said quietly. What happened, Darren? What did you find? Enough to bury them. But I didn't have the backing. You might. Then help me. Another pause. Then. Meet me tomorrow. 7 p.m. Back booth at Greenway Tavern. And Ethan? Don't tell anyone you're coming. The Greenway Tavern was one of those places that hadn't changed since the 80s. Wood paneling, dim lights, and a jukebox that played nothing but Springsteen and Fleetwood Mac. I found Darren sitting in the back booth, hunched over a cup of coffee like a man hiding from ghosts. He looked older. Not just in years, but in the way someone ages when they've seen too much and said too little. Ethan, he said, sliding a folder across the table. I kept a backup. Always do. Inside, printed emails, contract addendums with forged initials, and a flash drive. I tried to take it up the chain last year, Darren said. Thought if I went through the company's internal ethics board, someone would listen. Instead, Marcus got wind of it and suddenly I was retiring. And the Attorney General? He shook his head. I had one contact. She got transferred. After that, no response. I couldn't risk going public with nothing concrete. Not on my own. You think I can? You're not on the inside anymore. That makes you dangerous. And if you can get someone else to verify this, someone who's still there, you have a shot. I thought of Julia. Darren leaned in. Here's the real kicker. The contracts? They're inflated. Marcus and a few others have been funneling the difference into shell companies. One of them's called Rendell Strategic Partners. Know who's on the board? I shook my head. Marcus's wife, his brother-in-law, and a guy named Avery Chu, an external consultant who, surprise, never actually consulted for anyone. I exhaled slowly. How much money are we talking? Low end? 5, 6 million. Could be more. I was only scratching the surface when they pushed me out. And they fired me before I could see any of this. Darren nodded. Because you're clean, Ethan. You never played dirty. That made you a threat. They knew if you looked under the hood, you'd find the engine was built on lies. I looked down at the flash drive. Why help me now? Because I'm tired of watching bastards win. We sat in silence for a while, both staring at the folder like it might explode. As I stood to leave, Darren added, there's one more name. Someone still at Nexker. Someone high up. I couldn't confirm their role in it before I left. But if you can flip them. He scribbled a name on a napkin and handed it to me. Brian McLean. My old teammate. Quiet. Smart. Underpaid and overlooked. And possibly the key to burning the whole operation down. I sat in my apartment long past midnight, the flash drive clutched in one hand, Darren's napkin in the other. Brian McLean. He and I had started at Nexker the same year. While I climbed the client-facing side, Brian worked behind the curtain, contract analysis, internal auditing, compliance oversight. The guy knew numbers like I knew people. We weren't close, but we had mutual respect. And more importantly, he was one of the few who never played politics. I messaged him from a secure Proton Mail account. Subject, off the record. For both our sakes. Body, I have something you need to see. If you're still the man I remember, you'll meet me. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. Eastgate Storage, Unit 309. Come alone. No name. No threats. Just a chance. I didn't expect a reply. But an hour later it came. I'll be there. The next day, I got to the storage unit early. It wasn't glamorous, just concrete walls and a flickering overhead bulb, but it was neutral ground. I spread the documents Darren had given me on a fold-out table. Printed emails. Contract forgeries. Bank transfers. At 8:04, Brian walked in. Eyes sharp. Jaw tight. He looked around, saw the paperwork, and shut the door behind him. I figured you weren't reaching out to catch up, he said. Tell me you didn't know, I said, not accusing, hoping. Brian stared at the table for a long time. Then quietly, I suspected. But I never had proof. I saw contracts that didn't match the final invoices. Numbers that shifted before filing. But when I raised it, I was told to focus on big picture forecasting. Marcus's words. I slid him the folder. This is your proof. He flipped through it, face unreadable. Then he reached the final page. His eyes widened. I remember this one. It was rerouted through a subsidiary I couldn't trace. This confirms everything. I leaned forward. I want to take it up the chain. SEC, Attorney General. Hell, the press if I have to. But I need a second witness. Someone who's still on the inside. You're asking me to commit career suicide. I'm asking you to end theirs. He rubbed his temples, thinking. I've got 2 kids. A mortgage. You think this kind of truth makes the world pat you on the back? No, I said. But it keeps your kids from growing up thinking cowardice is survival. That hit him harder than I expected. He stared at the drive, then at me. I'll get you what you need. Internal emails. Approval logs. Payment chains. But if I go down, I'm not going alone. You won't, I said. You'll go up. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. You're not the only one they screwed, Ethan. You're just the first one who decided to fight back. 3 days later, Brian sent the first batch. He used encrypted storage, labeled the folder Q3_vendor_reconciliations, harmless on the surface, damning underneath. It was all there. Payment approvals that never matched the vendor contracts. Internal memos with altered dates. Bonus approvals that were manually overwritten before payroll executed. And the most important part? Every digital fingerprint tied back to Marcus Langford and his inner circle. They weren't just skimming. They were building fake shell vendors, issuing inflated payments, and rerouting the surplus to entities that didn't exist a year ago. Brian had flagged one especially bold move, a $320,000 strategic software enhancement payout to a vendor named Arkvale Group LLC. The address? A P.O. box. The contact email? A Gmail. I looked it up. The registered owner was Chase Langford, Marcus's son. These people weren't just greedy, they were arrogant. And they'd built this fraud machine assuming no one smart enough to notice would ever be angry enough to talk. They were wrong on both counts. Brian also confirmed something else. 2 weeks before I got fired, Marcus had ordered HR to prepare a file on me. Not a performance file, a narrative. Emails were cherry-picked. Slack messages taken out of context. A paper trail was being built in case I retaliated. But that wasn't all. They also started whispering about a non-compete clause I'd never signed. At first, I laughed. Then I stopped laughing. Because 2 days after I started at Virion, I got hit with a legal notice. Nextger Dynamics was suing me for breach of a non-compete agreement. They claimed I'd stolen trade secrets, approached Nextger clients, and breached confidential policies. I sat there holding the thick packet of legal jargon, skimming the printed contract. My signature was on it, but I'd never signed this. The font was wrong. The signature didn't match my own. Hell, the damn date was 2 months after I joined Nextger. They forged it. I called Darren immediately. Did they fake any of your documents when you left? He was quiet for a second. They tried. I caught it. That's when I knew it was more than just backdoor payouts. Ethan, if they forged a non-compete on you, that's criminal. I held the document up, watching the light hit the cheap toner. Good, I said. Because that means I've got leverage now. By the time I walked into Virion Technologies the next morning, I wasn't just a new hire, I was carrying dynamite. I met with Mason Caldwell, our general counsel, and laid it all out on his desk. The forged non-compete, the internal documents Julia and Brian had sent, and the patterns Darren had uncovered. He studied everything with the calm intensity of a man used to dealing with corporate landmines. This is bad, Mason said finally. For them. For us, it's opportunity. I raised an eyebrow. Opportunity. He leaned forward. Ethan, what Nextger's doing isn't just corporate misconduct. It's wire fraud, securities fraud, labor law violations, you name it. And now they've escalated by filing a fraudulent lawsuit against you. That's not just desperation, it's a mistake. A legal one. Can we countersue? He grinned. We're not just going to countersue. We're going to tear the mask off this entire operation. With your evidence, plus your witnesses, I'll take this straight to the SEC and the Attorney General's office. This could bring Nextger down. I sat back, exhaling slowly. I didn't think it would go this far. Oh, it always goes this far. But most people fold. You didn't. Mason brought in a forensic specialist to verify the forged signature. Within 2 hours, we had a sworn affidavit stating the signature wasn't a match based on angle pressure, spacing, and even the stroke slant. Virion's legal team began preparing a motion to dismiss the lawsuit on grounds of fabricated evidence and a criminal complaint to file separately. And then came the best part. That evening, Julia sent a secured folder titled Project Griffin, red folder. Inside were emails between Marcus and his executive assistant detailing the fake vendor network. One email in particular chilled me. Keep Griffin funds moving through Arkvale and Rendell. Make sure Ethan's bonus doesn't post. If he asks, say it's a processing delay. We'll have him replaced within the quarter anyway. We'll have him replaced. They planned it. Weeks before I even interviewed. They were setting me up, hoping I'd crack or walk away quietly. Instead, I walked straight into a better job with a company that was now ready to back me like a battering ram. That night, Mason called again. We're going to the SEC in the morning. Pack a suit. Am I just the witness? I asked. He paused. You're the whistleblower, Ethan. And in about 48 hours, you're going to be the man who brought down Nextger Dynamics. We arrived at the SEC field office in Dallas at 9 a.m. sharp. Mason carried the physical documentation, neatly tabbed folders, the forensic report, and Darren's sworn statement. I brought the flash drive. Julia and Brian had given us everything: metadata, internal audit logs, email chains, bonus suppression records, even dummy vendor registrations. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire Navarro, didn't say much as we presented the case. Just kept flipping pages, tapping her pen, occasionally glancing at the wall clock like it was her enemy. After 2 hours, she leaned back in her chair and said, "This is one of the cleanest fraud trails I've seen in a long time." Which means they've gotten cocky. Mason nodded. And reckless. Claire turned to me. You understand that if we move forward, you'll be subpoenaed. Your name will be on record as the primary whistleblower. I understand, I said. But let me be clear, I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing this because I gave them years of my life. And they discarded me like a piece of broken hardware. Now I want every single one of them held accountable. She smiled, thin and professional. Good. Because based on what I see here, Nextger's board is going to have a very bad morning soon. The next 72 hours were a blur. SEC agents issued inquiries. The Attorney General's office was briefed. Mason filed our countersuit and formally accused Nextger of document fraud, perjury, and workplace retaliation. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. At 6:42 a.m. on Tuesday, Brian texted me just 2 words. They're here. An unmarked van pulled up outside Nextger's Dallas office. Then 2. Then 4. A full federal sweep. Agents walked in calm, methodical, no sirens, just briefcases and badges. Civil and criminal enforcement both. Julia later told me Marcus tried to slip out the back. Too late. SEC agents intercepted him near the freight elevator. Darren called me that afternoon, laughing. Did you see the news? Nexker's shares dropped 15% in an hour. Trading halted. You lit a fuse, Ethan. But I wasn't finished yet. Virion's PR team released a clean, quiet statement about the countersuit, my full exoneration, and our cooperation with federal authorities. That night, I got a call from a restricted number. I answered. It was Marcus. You smug little traitor, he hissed. You think you've won? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't betray anyone, Marcus. I just told the truth. You'll regret this. No, Marcus, I said, smiling, you will? And I hung up. By Thursday morning, Nexker was no longer a tech firm. It was a crime scene. Local outlets broke the story first, Dallas-based Nexker under investigation for multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, but it didn't stay local for long. Bloomberg picked it up. CNBC. Even Reuters. Photos of the raid. Headlines about executive misconduct. Whistleblower exposes bonus embezzlement. They didn't name me, not yet. But I didn't need the credit. Watching Marcus Langford's face as he was escorted out of his glass fortress in handcuffs? That was my bonus. Julia messaged me. He looked pale. Like someone unplugged his ego. The board acted fast. Too fast. By noon, 4 executives were suspended pending investigation. Internal emails leaked, ones that proved Marcus had been warned about irregularities 6 months ago. He didn't act. He buried it. And now he was buried by it. By Friday, Nexker's legal counsel issued a formal withdrawal of the lawsuit against me. Buried in fine print, they admitted the non-compete agreement could not be authenticated. In simpler terms? Forged. Fabricated. Illegal. I was exonerated publicly and completely. The court ordered them to pay me $135,000 in unpaid bonuses and commissions. But the real win? They had to admit on record that I was innocent of all accusations. A week later, the dominoes kept falling. Darren was contacted to testify before the Finance Oversight Committee. Brian retained legal counsel and filed a whistleblower retaliation claim. Virion backed him with full legal support. And Julia? She handed in her resignation effective immediately and walked away with a clean record and her head held high. I made sure Virion hired her by the following Monday. But while the world watched Nexker burn, I stayed quiet. Focused. Professional. Because the most satisfying revenge isn't loud. It's strategic. And surgical. It's watching the same people who once held power beg for mercy behind closed courtroom doors. And knowing that while they drown in consequences, you've already built a better life. A month after the raid, I stood in Virion's glass conference room watching the city skyline stretch out like opportunity itself. Sunlight hit the windows just right, like a quiet reminder that this view belonged to me now. Not Marcus. Not Darren. Not anyone else. Me. Mason entered with a thick folder and a grin. The final settlement package from Nexker just came through. You're officially owed more than we expected. Interest included. I raised an eyebrow. How much more? $150. After taxes. And your name's cleared across every industry registry that matters. Not that it'll matter for long because the board just approved your promotion. I stared at him. Promotion? Vice President of Business Development. The words hit like a wave I hadn't been expecting, even though I'd done everything to earn it. You serious? As a heart attack. You're not just the guy who crushed Nexker, Ethan. You're the guy who rebuilt our entire client acquisition framework in 3 months. Our revenue's up 31%. You've earned this. I sat down slowly, trying to take it in. For years, I'd been gaslit into believing loyalty meant silence. That being good at your job meant accepting less. That the people at the top would notice your sacrifice. But they never notice. Not until you burn down their safe little world. Later that afternoon, I sent out the offer letters to 3 former Nexker employees, Cindy, Aaron, and Kayla. All people who'd been chewed up by that same machine. They'd be joining my department by the end of the month. Full salaries. Full respect. Clean slates. I didn't hire them out of pity. I hired them because I knew what they were capable of when they weren't being crushed by liars. That night, I poured myself a drink and walked out to my apartment balcony looking out at the city that had almost swallowed me. I was no longer looking for validation. I was the validation. I'd clawed my way back from betrayal. Not with rage. Not with violence. But with receipts, precision, and the right people in my corner. The next morning, I got an email from an unknown address. Subject: You did it. Proud of you. D. Darren. I smiled. Yeah, I did do it. But I wasn't done yet. Because while Nexker's executives faced court dates and investigations, I had one final move left on the board. And it had Marcus Langford's name written all over it. Marcus Langford's face was back in the news, except this time it wasn't a feature about corporate growth or visionary leadership. It was a mugshot. Turns out he broke before the others did. Faced with criminal charges, a public lawsuit, and internal betrayal from the same execs he once protected, Marcus folded like wet paper. Word leaked that he cut a deal. He'd agreed to testify against the rest of the Nexker board in exchange for reduced charges, wire fraud, document forgery, obstruction of justice. The deal would keep him out of federal prison. Barely. But it came with conditions. He had to hand over everything. Company servers, private emails, encrypted backups, even his burner phones. And when he did, the real rot surfaced. Hidden bonuses rerouted through Cayman accounts, bribes to client procurement officers, fake compliance audits signed by his assistant. It went deeper than even Darren had guessed. I got a call from Claire Navarro at the SEC. Her tone was dry, but I could hear the heat underneath it. You were right. The bonus suppression scheme was just the surface. Marcus gave us documents implicating 5 additional executives, 2 procurement heads, and a CFO at another partner firm. Is that enough? It's more than enough. This just turned into a full-scale white-collar conspiracy investigation. But what came next was the part that surprised me. Claire continued, we're filing for restitution. Victims of the fraud, including employees denied compensation, will be eligible for payouts once asset recovery begins. You're saying they'll actually pay back the people they screwed? She laughed. Eventually. It'll take time. Civil suits. Seizures. But yes. And we'll be calling on you again to testify during board proceedings. I'll be there. After I hung up, I checked the news again. Marcus was trending. People in the comments were tearing him apart. Former employees. Investors. Even a few old colleagues who'd once defended him. The man who called me disloyal had sold out every last partner to save his own skin. And now? He was radioactive. I got a text from Julia later that night. He tried to call me. I didn't answer. I replied. Good. Let him sit in the silence he created. Because when you take everything from people who stayed loyal, eventually they take everything back. And Marcus hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. 2 weeks after Marcus flipped, the dominoes collapsed fast. The SEC announced a full investigation into every contract Nexker had signed over the past 5 years. Investors bailed. Partners froze accounts. Stock dropped below $1. Then came the final death blow. Nexker Dynamics filed for bankruptcy. No spin. No press conference. Just a quiet filing and a list of unpaid debts that ran 86 pages long. A company I helped build gone. But I didn't feel regret. I felt justice. The former CFO was arrested trying to flee the country with 2 suitcases full of cash and a shredded hard drive. The assistant who forged my non-compete? Indicted. HR's Vanessa? Fired and sued for retaliatory termination. It wasn't just Marcus who went down. It was the whole rotten tree. But the revenge wasn't in their downfall. It was in my rise. Because as Nexker burned, Virion soared. Our department broke every quarterly target. I hired 2 more former Nexker employees, ones they overlooked and underpaid. Gave them fair contracts. Real bonuses. The kind of leadership I never had. I kept things low-key. No social media. No interviews. I didn't need a spotlight. My payback came in quiet wins. In knowing that every time Marcus sees my name in a headline now, it's not connected to scandal. It's connected to success. And every time he sits in another courtroom, listens to his lawyers lie for him, or watches his former empire be dissected like a dead animal, he'll know it wasn't a competitor who took him down. It was me. The guy he fired for taking a single interview. A year later, I stood on stage at the Virion annual summit, suit pressed, mic clipped, lights blazing. I was no longer just a manager. I was vice president of business development for the fastest growing tech firm in the Southwest. As I looked out across the room, I saw them, people who had been broken by Nexker, who now stood tall beside me. Brian, now head of compliance. Julia, leading finance. Darren, consulting on internal ethics protocols. We weren't just survivors. We were the architects of something better. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't talk about numbers or strategy. I talked about integrity. About what happens when silence protects the wrong people. And how real loyalty, earned not demanded, is what builds empires that don't collapse under fraud and fear. Afterward, I stepped out into the cool air, loosened my tie, and checked my phone. One new message. From Marcus Langford. Subject, you won. Body, hope it was worth it. I stared at it. No anger. No gloating. Just pity. I typed back 3 words. You never understood. Then deleted his number for good. Because the best revenge wasn't the money. It wasn't the titles or the headlines or the prison sentences. It was the simple fact that I walked away clean with my name, my future, and my people intact. Marcus built his power on lies. I built mine on truth. And only one of us is still standing.